Just because breastfeeding is natural doesn't mean it's easy. But you don't have to do it alone. That's where the Lactation Network comes in. The Lactation Network helps parents at every stage of the breastfeeding journey. Whether you need support resolving feeding issues, choosing the right breast pump, creating a plan for weaning, or anything in between. The Lactation Network is the largest network of licensed breastfeeding experts in the country. They provide in-home, in-office, and telehealth consultations in all 50 states with no out-of-pocket cost. Get the breastfeeding care you deserve with the Lactation Network. Visit tln.care/podcast to schedule your own insurance-covered lactation consultation today.
The Podcast Playground. Hooray!
Hey, welcome to another episode of Celebrity Jobber. I'm Jeff Zito, and pretty interesting when you talk about professional athletes because sometimes in professional baseball, you can get drafted out of high school, which means you could be 17 years old. I know Alex Rodriguez was 17 years old when he got drafted out of high school. So theoretically, his first paying job could have been when he was 17 years old. And that would be, Major League Baseball, unless, of course, he had a paper route or something like that. So, baseball, pretty different from a lot of the other professional sports, which makes you, go to college for at least a year or 3, in baseball. I think you can get drafted out of your junior year once you start going to college. When you go to junior college, I think you can get drafted after your second year from junior college. Adam LaRoche went to 2 junior colleges, which is a pretty different path than most. Did he have a first job? What was his big break to finally make it to the big leagues? And what is he doing now? We're about to find out. Former major leaguer for the Braves, the Pirates, the White Sox, the Nationals, the Diamondbacks. And I'm probably leaving a couple of teams out. Adam LaRoche, my guest this week on Celebrity Jobber.
Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Where you at?
Oh, I'm at our ranch in Kansas, buddy.
Wow, that seems peaceful.
Well, it is. It is. I can't lie. This has been our off-season home for 20 years, so we love it out here.
And you're originally from Kansas, aren't you, Adam?
Yeah, and I grew up right here about 10 miles away in a small town called Fort Scott.
Okay, and you had a pretty interesting path, I'd say, to get to the major leagues, because, I was reading about you last night, and, not too many guys have the path, took the path that you took.
Well, I'm incredibly grateful for it because it's given me a platform to do some of the stuff we get to do now, which has been, honestly, way more fun than baseball was, which is hard to imagine.
Well, what are you doing now?
Now I run our E3 Ranch Foundation, which we were kind of doing back when I was still playing. And back then it wasn't officially a foundation. I didn't even really know what that was. We were just hosting our combat soldiers out here to our ranch in the off season as a way to thank them and give them a breather from stuff they might be going through. And it really started back when I was still playing. I'd go to, anytime we'd go to D.C. to play the Nationals, or when I was playing for 4 years in D.C., I got to spend a lot of time at Walter Reed, which is our military hospital there. And at that time, it was pretty full, and there was a lot of dudes coming in and coming through there that have been hurt pretty bad, and just getting to spend time with them, hear their stories, just really kind of messed me up. Seeing what they went through, and hearing these young kids that would talk about all they could think about was getting back overseas with their teammates. Like, hey, get me fixed up so I can go back, and just their attitude gave us the idea to start utilizing this ranch to bring those guys out and tell them thank you and kind of give them a change of scenery. So, yeah, that started years ago, and now it's grown and doing it more and more. So we're loving it.
And Adam, this is now your full-time job, isn't it?
It is, man. There's a couple parts of the foundation. So one side is helping the vets and hosting those guys, and then we also are in the counter human trafficking space in partnership with law enforcement to try to stop the fastest growing criminal enterprise in our country, which is hard to believe with the drug trade and everything else going on. But it's growing rapidly, and been honored to be able to help combat that.
Wow. Well, tell me a little bit about growing up in Kansas, Adam, and tell me about, like I said earlier, your path to the major leagues. It was one that usually, I don't hear about. And I'm mentioning it because I have a son that plays college baseball, and he's taken a little bit of an interesting path as well. But you went to 2 community colleges in Kansas, correct?
One in Kansas, one in Oklahoma.
Okay.
Sure did.
So what happened? What happened there? You bounced like in high school. I would imagine you were a great player in high school. You decided to go to a community college. Was it because they had a good program? Did you want more playing time? Because I found that out going to a community college. Well, everybody's a freshman and a sophomore, so you're not sitting the bench at a major D1 program when you're a freshman or a sophomore.
No, I would say it was more because I was not a good student.
Okay.
And my grades were terrible, and the JUCO was going to be much easier school-wise to go and be eligible to play baseball. So I say that half embarrassingly that my probably didn't apply myself the way I should have early on. And so JUCO, and really, and another reason was because, and I don't know if it's still this way, but you had to wait 3 years if you went to a 4-year before you could sign professionally. So coming out of high school, I was ready to start my career as soon as possible. And I knew if I went to a JUCO, you were then eligible to be drafted and signed after every year. So, yeah, I went that route and played here for a year and then transferred down to Oklahoma, which I had a coach there that was exactly what I needed at the time because he was basically like a drill sergeant that you were going to get nothing past, and you were punished for everything you did wrong, which for me was a lot. And and it was what I needed at 19, 20 years old to get me prepared for professional baseball. So that was in 2000 when I signed with Atlanta, and was able to play with them for a few years.
Yeah, you got around. You played for a few teams. You had some great seasons. You were an all-star, and in your family, baseball was a part of your family, correct? I know your dad was a coach. Your uncle was a coach.
Yes, that's right. 2 of the best coaches I've had. My dad played in the major leagues for a long time, so that was interesting for my brothers and I because we grew up around major leaguers. So I don't think we never viewed them as superheroes, or we never viewed baseball as something that was out of reach or like a pipe dream.
Really?
I think we were all 3 just kind of like that's what we were going to do. Just kind of ignorantly not knowing how difficult it actually is because we grew up around it. We got to go to spring training with Dad. We got to follow him around as he was coaching after he was done playing and just grew up around the sport.
Yeah, I find it amazing when I talk to guys with your level of success. A lot of guys will say the same thing, like, no backup plan. This was it. We were going, balls to the wall, in whatever direction, whether they're movie star or athlete or comedian. It was always like there was no backup plan whatsoever. And I can actually understand it coming from your perspective. Baseball in the family. Your dad played in the major leagues. So, yeah, I'm going to play in the major leagues, too. Plus, you're getting some pretty good instruction from your old man at a young age.
That's right. And, man, that's a hard one to teach because how do you tell young kids, to go all in on one thing or a sport or something that it does take, there is a very small percentage that make it in that profession. So, you're exactly right, though. The more guys I talk with, and I see that a lot in the military community, especially the kind of the special operations side of guys, that it wasn't a matter of if they're going to do it or whether they're going to pass or make it through selection. It was just, this is what they're going to do with no backup plan and no safety net and no other option, right? Because I think a lot of times if we have an option or an easier option, we're more likely to take it. And if it's not there, then it's not there. It's not even on your mind as a direction you can go. So I'm not sure it's the smartest way to approach it, but it's just kind of naturally the way I did it, and fortunately it worked out.
Yeah, so in college, what did you study? Did you have a, were you
Absolutely nothing.
Is that a junior college joke or?
Oh man, I really don't remember it. And again, not something I would go preach on in schools for sure. But with no backup plan, I just wasn't smart enough to think, what if this doesn't work out? What if I get injured and have to go a different direction? Because I don't know what I'd be doing. Honestly, I'd have probably gone the military route. But man, fortunately, the injuries weren't too bad, and I was able to continue playing.
It is kind of an amazing story. You had, like I said, a lot of great years in Major League Baseball. Do you remember, was there a certain series of events that happened to you where it was what you would call your big break? I know there was some big things that happened to you in college, which I'd like you to talk about. But do you consider a few different things like your big break where you really got on everybody's radar? Because I know you were drafted 3 times, correct?
I was.
So you had to be on the radar for a little bit. But do you remember what it was that really kind of got you to where you are?
Well, I was actually, in high school, I was probably a better pitcher than I was a first baseman. So the first time I was drafted was as a pitcher out of high school, and I just really didn't want to pitch for the rest of my career. So it was a little, looking back, it's a little arrogant at the time, as an 18-year-old kid telling Major League scouts what I was going to do and wasn't going to do. But I just really, my heart was not in pitching like it was playing every day. So went on to junior college, and kind of the mission there for those 2 years was to prove myself as a first baseman and as a hitter. And then fortunately, so probably in college, it would have been getting a chance to go to the College World Series my sophomore year and playing in the Junior College World Series, which gets just a lot of exposure, and had a really good tournament there, and ended up signing with Atlanta. Which is funny looking back. So Dayton Moore, who was our former GM here in Kansas City just recently, but he was our minor league coordinator back when I first signed with Atlanta. And getting to know him over the years as he became a general manager and kind of his career shot up, he told me that the reason they drafted me as a first baseman, but they really wanted me to pitch.
Really?
And we laugh about it now because he was like, "Man, we were pretty sure you were going to suck as a hitter, and you would just naturally go back to pitching, but it just never happened." So, yeah, they had a game plan, but kind of fell through on them. And it ended up working out.
It's funny too because every time you talk to a young player that is a position player, it seems like they always want to pitch. They always want to get into a game time situation where the team runs out of pitching, and they're like, "Get me out there, coach." And I think pitchers are the same way. They always, they need a pinch hitter. They want to come out. They want to swing the bat. And maybe you were labeled as that pitcher that just wanted to swing the bat.
Well, I think so, and I think it's all you always want what you don't have, and it's funny you say that because I got to play a long time in the big leagues, and towards the end, every manager I had, I would beg for them to let me pitch because I hadn't pitched in 15 years, and finally, Robin Ventura, when I was with the White Sox, my manager, Robin Ventura, let me pitch in a game, like a blowout game. I got to pitch an inning against the Yankees, and that was really fun to get back on the mound and see if I still had it.
And did you? How'd you do?
Man, I did, and it was perfect because I always would tell pitchers how easy their job is. You guys get to go golf.
Right.
days in a row and then go work one day, must be tough. So we'd always bust their balls about how easy it is to get hitters out and all that. So it was just coincidence that I had a 1-2-3 inning. But to be able to go back and basically, tell the pitcher, see, I told you, like, anybody can do this. It's just ironic how it worked out. So it was pretty cool.
And against the Bronx Bombers, no less.
Yeah, it was perfect.
Adam, so tell me a little bit about when you were growing up. Did you have a first job? Like, I know what you're doing now, and I know you were a Major League Baseball player, but what about your very first job, a paying gig, whether it was, when you were younger, whether you were delivering newspapers, or do you remember what your first job was?
Well, I remember a couple. I remember when I was really little working at a golf course in their kitchen and really doing nothing other than cleaning kitchen equipment and cleaning dishes. But the first, and I was really young, but I remember probably freshman, sophomore year in high school working for a rancher out here and a farmer. So kind of getting introduced to the cattle industry and crops and tractors and equipment, and started doing that for a guy here for a couple of years. And actually my first few years in pro ball, which were in the minor leagues, I would come home and help with some ranching, and then also help a construction company in the off season. So that was back, I was a 20-something round pick. So I didn't get any, a huge bonus or any money. So coming back in the off season, I always had to, find a job for a few months. But anything outdoors, I loved it.
I knew guys back in the day that I'm a little bit older than you, Adam, but just a little. But I knew guys back in the day, like some friends of mine. I went to a good baseball high school here in Florida, and a lot of those guys would collect unemployment for, and I don't know if you could still do that anymore, but they would collect unemployment for during the off season. I don't know if they do that anymore.
Well, I doubt it, but I remember getting my first major league paycheck, and I'm sitting in my locker in Atlanta playing with the Braves, and I remember calling my dad, and how proud my dad was, and also how pissed at me he was because he played. I think the paycheck, it was bigger than his last year, which would have been his 14th year playing in the big leagues. Of what they used to make back then. So, yeah, I still get to hear about how spoiled we are in baseball now compared to back in his day when you could be a 10-year major league veteran and come home and be, selling used cars in the offseason to make ends meet.
That's funny because I would, for a second there, I forgot that your dad was a Major League Baseball player. So if you would have told me that you called your dad when you were looking at your first paycheck and he got pissed because it was more than his entire year at work, and he was, drove a truck, or, he was an AC repairman or something like that. Well, yeah, I mean, you could imagine that's the case, but no, he was a Major League Baseball player. So I could see that pissing him off.
Oh, it was funny. And he's, we'll still get into it about, whatever. Pitchers were better back then, and, how old timers are. So, but yeah, it's crazy how big some of the contracts have gotten now, and where the money's at. It's wild.
Well, it's, I guess one of your first jobs, as you mentioned, being a rancher, kind of got you, involved with what you're doing today, the E3 Ranch. What's your major or your main job, I'd say, on the ranch these days?
Well, all I do now, which has been incredible, is run our foundation. So I travel quite a bit now, but that's been, I'm not kidding, that's been the greatest thing I've ever got to do. And that surpasses baseball, getting to play in the major leagues. Like, this has been some of the most fun I've ever had. And we get to host our combat vets out here to the ranch and serve those guys. And then, on the counter human trafficking side and just kind of all different branches of it, of really being a gap filler for wherever God needs us and wherever somebody is in a bad spot, to be able to help them out.
And if there are combat vets that might be listening to this and they're interested in the E3 Ranch, is there a way that they can get a hold of you?
Well, yeah, and you can go on, just the E3 Foundation site. But one thing interesting about the way we do it is we take recommendations.
Okay.
For other teammates. So instead of a guy being able to apply to come out, they can put up one of their friends or former teammates or, somebody from their squad, and just give us a little background on who this person, who their friend is or, their teammate is and why they would like to send him out. And it's a good thing and a bad thing, but as you can imagine, you can only host so many at a time, and there's only so many months in the year. So we're now starting to work on, potentially some other locations and some other ranches where we can continue to grow and expand this, because we get to see the impact when we have these guys out. And I don't know how to explain it without being here and seeing it, but just when the light comes on, when those guys kind of get back in this environment, and it's a man's environment. Like, we're going to have some cigars, some whiskey, some hunting, some shooting competitions, fishing, just depending on what's in season. But it really kind of puts them back in with like-minded dudes, back in that team room, brotherhood environment that those guys miss so much when they get out. And I can relate on the baseball side, because I've got friends in sports that you would think made a stupid amount of money, have all these things you would think would be, have nothing to complain about. But when they lost that jersey and you become a former guy, it does something to you, and a lot of those guys just kind of struggle with it and become depressed. And then, times that by 100, our guys that were over actually doing real work overseas, that come back into civilian life and just feel like they have no mission, no purpose. Nobody can really understand them or relate with them, or so, to be able to bring those groups back together,
man,
put them back in, and then to follow through with them. And, so many guys that come out will go get a teammate and bring them back and come back again as kind of support staff and come back and host another soldier. So they just continue to grow.
You're a real good guy, Adam LaRoche. I tell you, you're doing some great things for our military, and I really appreciate your time today.
Really good to meet you.
You too, man. Buddy. Take care. Wow, really interesting story, and a couple things got me with Adam LaRoche. Number one, his father being a Major League Baseball player, that being commonplace for him when he was a kid, didn't look at playing Major League Baseball as being some like pie-in-the-sky dream. It was almost like kind of normal. So it wasn't like something that he felt was so far out of reach that he needed a backup plan. He mentioned he was a shitty student in college. And I kind of laughed about that. But, he did seem like he was a little embarrassed about it as well. But as you can see, as time moves on, and now he's running this E3 Ranch, this great foundation for combat vets from the military. I think he's a little bit smarter than he might give himself credit for. Maybe he just didn't apply himself in school. Your parents always, you're just not applying yourself. Well, probably a really good example right there with Adam. The other couple of things, I guess I should say, other than that, would be how, when you're a Major League Baseball player, people think you're making millions and millions of dollars. Now, I'd say when he came up with the Atlanta Braves back in 2004, maybe the major league minimum was somewhere around $300,000 or $350,000 a year, which is a nice chunk of change. Don't get me wrong. But I thought it was pretty interesting that during the off season, he went out and found a job like construction or working on a ranch. I mean, who would do that? I did have some friends that growing up with who made it, to the minor leagues. And those guys would either file for, unemployment, or they would also, get a job, but they weren't, in the major leagues. They were in the minor leagues, which is a pretty huge salary discrepancy. There's a pretty huge difference between major league and minor league salary. So I thought that said something about Adam LaRoche, Major League Baseball player for, 6-7 months out of the year. And then 4 or 5 months out of the year, he's working a construction job, or he's working on a ranch. I thought that was pretty cool. No backup plan, but his big break happened probably over the course of a few years. He was on the radar as a pitcher in high school, and he wanted to be a hitter, made it to his Junior College World Series, and was the MVP of the Junior College World Series that year. And I think that pretty much started putting him on the map a little bit. But again, drafted 3 different times, which is kind of unusual. Not unusual to be drafted twice. I'd say 3 times is kind of unusual. But there you have it. Follow me on Twitter @TheJeffZito, and on Instagram, Jeff Zito, and the Celebrity Jobber Podcast. And please download, subscribe, rate, leave a comment on Apple Podcast or wherever you pod. Thanks for listening. I'm Jeff Zito.